Class will be mainly conducted in English, okay, but you are welcome to raise your questions in Mandarin because we have an excellent co-teacher, besides Professor Alain Brossat. I want to do a very brief introduction to Professor Alain Brossat before he starts his introduction to his course. We've been friends for more than 10 years. Our institute, Social Research and Cultural Studies, started our liaison. I think since 2004, started to prepare, arrange our conferences. So starting then, we have already 5 conferences plus summer universities that we've been working together. The name of that network is Nomad Philosophers here and there, or Diagonal, this transnational, transcultural network of critical thought. So that is something that our program, Social Research and Cultural Studies, all our colleagues are highly interested and motivated, and most of our students also follow this track. So starting from war and civil war, to culture and politics, to biopolitics, ethics and subjectivation, and critical order, and the 5th time is political uses of the bodies. So it took place in Taiwan twice, in France, and then Portugal, and then Albania. So Professor Alain Brossat also came here to teach a seminar on Foucault 4 years ago. And we are very happy to invite him here again, because apparently he is launching a new project, a book project, on revisiting the Second World War through cinematic lens, but of course with his philosophical edge. Professor Brossat taught in Paris for many years. He was a colleague of Akira, and many others. You know, Foucault and other people were there. All of them are there. And Professor Brossat taught Foucault, Deleuze, Lyotard, Jean-Renoir, Rancière, Adieu, and working on topics of political violence, the camp, concentration camp, and genocide, biopolitics, and all these issues are still taking place nowadays. It's not just a visiting the 20th century experience, but it's an ongoing project. I mean, ongoing crisis, not project. But I know Professor Brossat is working on an essay on the happenings in Gaza, the bombing and everything. So similar things are taking place all over the world. So that is something we need to rethink and look into. This semester we had this Second World War cinematic representation of the war, but it's talking from different perspectives. So you will soon know. And Professor Brossat also is a specialist of dynamic and many German thinkers. So he had translated more than 10 books from German to French. And he has been invited to teach Dongjing Daxue, University of Tokyo, Chile, San Diego, and Germany, and other places. So he has also a very lengthy list of publications that I am not planning to read at the site here. But if you're interested, you should check them out and read. But at least there's one book in Chinese that's translated by Dr. 危险哲学家傅科 and so we are really very happy. All of our colleagues are very happy to have you here again. And we wish that after this year you still can frequent. But stay. Not only visit, but stay and teach. So I need to excuse myself because I need to accompany our guest. 中岛文博今天下午来演讲lecture who gave a talk this afternoon from UTCP Center for Philosophy of University of Tokyo. Okay, so this is the last evening he will be staying in Shinkun, so I have to rush him for a great dinner.
So what I intend to present this seminar, this semester, maybe next one we'll see, is very different from what I did 4 years ago. So very different in the form as well in the content. Since it's a seminar about cinema, we will see films. We will see films, or at least parts of films, clips of films, maybe sometimes films, or films, good films. And that is not only talk about films, of course, we have to show the pictures. And since we are at a place where people very obviously from different places, origins, are coming together, and people having various different mother tongues, we try to do things in such a way that language problems do not handicap our discussions, do not hinder us. So, as a rule, we will talk in English. I will talk in English, because I suppose that if I talk in French, you will be distressed. So, we talk as a rule in English, but there will be some parts in Chinese, up to you, and thanks to my wife. But these parts in Chinese will be like in my absence, to my regret, to my deep regret. But okay, feel free to speak in Mandarin, in Chinese. That is this being meant for those who prefer to speak Chinese because they feel more comfortable in Mandarin, but also for other ones who will take this opportunity to improve their Chinese. So, this is the general proposal. It's experimental, it will change, of course, and we will try to improve our device, the way we work. And I would like to insist on this special issue, stake, language, English, which is not my language, my mother tongue, not a language in which I feel at home. And I imagine for most of you too, it's a borrowed language. So we have to take English into consideration here as a common tool. We have to use it for conventional reasons, that is, let's say, globalization in short, which means that for those for whom English is not mother tongue, okay, we should be tolerant, because what we talk here is not really English. That is, the English, an Englishman or an American would talk according to special norms and rules. It's not standard English, but it's some kind of an Esperanto, or in Latin, lingua franca, communication language, something we cannot avoid. So English in commas, inverted commas. What I'm saying here has a distinct purpose. It means no domination through language in the discussions. Okay, now I try to come to the heart of our matter. As you saw in the description of the seminar, it's a seminar about cinema and war, but first of all, you should not infer from that it is inspired by any kind of passion for war films. Not at all. Since it is, for a good part, at least, devoted to the Pacific War, that is the second war in the Pacific, between 1941 and 1945, it has necessarily to deal with some technical aspects of war. That is war on the sea, as you will see, war under the sea, war in the air, each landing fights in the jungle and so on. And if you read the Wikipedia articles devoted to these films, I mean mostly American films, but also Japanese films, you will notice that a very important part of the public for this kind of films has a real passion for military materials, devices, arms, ships, planes, guns, uniforms, flags, everything you want, and watches very, very carefully at the accuracy of the reconstruction or the restoration of battle scenes. These people, this kind of public, cares very much about all the technical differences between, let's say, a Zero plane, that is the famous Japanese fighter during the Second World War, and a Spitfire, the B-19 and the B-21. And these people, they will notice immediately that in such film, the famous carrier XY Lambda, which has been sunk during the battle, has been in the film actually replaced by another one, more recent, which in some details look different. And these people, they will complain as professional or amateur military experts about this quite unacceptable inaccuracy for them. So I would like to make it quite clear, this is not at all my issue here, because basically, I must confess, I don't care a damn about the difference between a crusader and a destroyer, of course, except in as much as it matters for the understanding of the plot and the unfolding of a filmic narrative. Okay, this having been said, I would like now to tell you in a very synthetic way, simple way, what the headlines of the seminar will be, for me at least, can be displayed by you later. And okay, this is the program I'm proposing, but it's liable to change, to move in different directions. So I give you my points, and then we will talk. First point, it is a seminar on cinema, or more precisely, cinema, movie, if you prefer, in a specific context, and used cinema, movie, used to specific aims, with special targets. It is about cinema, and this point is this issue is crucial, not so much as art, cinema not as art, that is not as this new form of art which has been invented and promoted last century with its specific forms of language and, let's say, conic powers. That is, it is not the cinema which is studied in France by well-known authors like André Bazin, Gilles Deleuze, or Jacques Rancière. But what I study, what I'm interested in for this seminar is cinema as a factory. That is, cinema as an industry set for manufacturing performative narrative, efficient narratives. That is, cinema as a form of power, of course. A power which can be compared in this context, in the context we are dealing with industrial powers, let's say, steel industry, or also political power, the executive in the American context, Washington, etc. That is power in the Foucaultian sense, if this means something for it. The second point, it is a seminar on war. And not any kind of war, but total war. This point will be crucial. War in the Pacific, but also on land, mainland China, in Southwest Asia, as total war. Total war, in brief, means, of course, it can mean many things, but it means, in particular, a very specific relation between enemies. Enemies which are involved in the fight. Because what is aimed at in this context of total war, it is not only victory, but total victory. And total victory, it goes through the complete destruction, that is the extermination, or at least specific form of extermination of the enemy. And this is the point, extermination, it has a presupposition, that is the degradation of the enemy from his human condition or status. This will be the point for the next course, next week. So, third point, it is a seminar about how you treat your enemy when you are involved in a total war, having his extermination, his annihilation and not only victory, I insist on this, as your horizon. That is, it is a seminar on the dehumanization of the enemy, which is generally equal to what we might call animalization, transformation into an animal of the enemy, which means in the context of what we're talking about, the Japanese soldiers in the American film, we are going to see the Japanese soldiers presented, described, called, named as monkeys. Monkeys, Japanese soldiers as monkeys, apes, in the war propaganda of the US during all the conflict, that is, from Pearl Harbor to the capitulation of Japan. And on this issue, you have to see, you have to refer to the book by John W. Bauer, War. I had a doubt about the title, but it's War and Race in the Pacific War. If I'm not mistaken, I will check. This book you can find at the library here. So, animalization of the enemy. But, since democratic norms and this kind of practice, that is animalization of human beings, do not match very well together, and this particularly in a context at which or where those who animalize, I know this word doesn't exist, but I have to call it, animalize the enemy, those who animalize the enemy are supposed to fight for universal values like freedom, justice, democracy, or in the name of civilization, and against barbarism, against barbarians. Since we have this problem, it has to be also a seminar about the way we, I mean, when I say we, I mean we in the West, in Western democracies. That is a we opposed to where you are here, people from here. We in the West, in Western democracies, are used to divide and separate the good from the evil in theoretical, philosophical, and political terms. In the post-Second World War world, the barbarian from the civilized, democracy from what is supposed to be its opposite, that is fascism, totalitarianism. For us, in Western Europe, the degradation of any kind of other human, the degradation of any kind of other into an animal, into a vermin, a rat, an ape, or whatever. This is a practice which bears for us the distinct mark of the absolute evil in politics, because it is for us, according to our historical experience, what leads to extermination camps, what the Nazis did in the camps. So, in that sense, and from this angle, the animalization of the enemy by people who call themselves freedom fighters in the context of the war, in the context of this war, in the Pacific. This is something which is very contentious. It is what a French philosopher you heard about, maybe, Gaston Bachelard, called polemic fact. Polemic fact, that is something which challenges our common understanding of things in general, logics, reasoning, politics, etc. Okay, next point. It's about narratives. The state of narratives in the context of a total war. One of the characteristics of total war is that the rear doesn't matter less than the front. Total war is total mobilization not only of the available military forces, but as well of the population as a whole, including children, women, elderly persons, everyone. On this issue, see the book by Ernst Jünger, Total Mobilization. I'm sure it exists in English. This mobilization will go through language, pictures, slogans, speeches of all kinds, all which makes this magna propaganda. Propaganda, we have to remember here, is not typical for authoritarian or totalitarian regimes. Democratic propaganda exists. And the war against Japan was, at that time, a perfect lab or workshop for this. But propaganda is, in that case, something which is a bit more sophisticated than what it appears to be in what is the standard word for this, that is Orwell's famous novel, 1984. That is, it is something a bit more sophisticated than the constant repetition of preposterous slogans or phrases of Big Brother. In democratic conditions, the public is conditioned not mainly by this kind of rough device, but in the milieu or element of narratives, it is conditioned by the expansion, by the circulation of, let's say, simply stories, all kinds of stories. The public has to be captured by all these stories which aim at bringing it together into a unique and homogeneous as possible community. A community which has war, that is war effort, of course, as its common horizon. And this is where, of course, cinema, movie, films matter so much, because cinema is a fantastic factory for narratives, for stories aimed at the total mobilization of the population, aimed at the transformation of the population into a warring community. And this in the context of total war, from Hollywood to the battle places, that's Guadalcanal, Hiroshima. So war movies have to be taken into consideration as a way of making war, but making war on the front line of narratives. And it is very striking that immediately in the weeks following Kurosawa, in Hollywood, but as well as in Tokyo, the film industry is, probably speaking, drafted, enlisted, and empowered on the second front, which is for the rear mostly, the patriotic front, and this through these martial law narratives. So, on this question, on this issue, I think we have to make a distinction. We will see this. It will be quite clear when we see films, when we watch films. We have to make a distinction between films which were shot and presented to the American public, the public in the United States, during the war, and which we can consider for this very reason as a part of the war, an element of the war, that is a tool, a weapon for the war, used on this second front. We have to make a difference, a distinction between these films and the films which have been shot in the aftermath of the Japanese defeat or later, that is from the end of the year 1945 till right now, since everybody can notice that this spring, this source or narrative, it is not right. It is not right at all. Just, I imagine that most of you have seen already the last in both sense, film by Hayao Miyazaki, animation film, which was, as you certainly know, to global hit success, and which belongs very obviously to our own corpus. So this story is not finished, it's not over, it continues. So the distinction between these two sets of films is necessary, because the war films which were shot during the war itself, they are in search for immediate mobilization effects. As I said, they should not be considered so much as, let's say, a mirror, a reproduction of war conditions, but really as an element, as a part of war. And by contrast, the film which have been shot after the arms were laid down, they belong to another milieu, let's say, which is what we call, at least in France, collective memory. Collective memory. But I think this issue, this motto has traveled already to other countries. That is what I mean, that films on the Pacific War and on the war in Eastern Asia are the melting pot in which the collective memory of this war is worked out. The melting pot in which the memory of this dramatic past settles down. Collective memory is very active. It is an endless production. It reinvents the past constantly, and Freud would say it works. It works, and all the psychoanalytic tribe after him would say it works. Collective memory works. Arbeit in German, as the sense our Arbeit, that is mourning, as some kind of the work, psychic activity. Okay, but collective memory as a form of memory which is involuntary, which is a device which is set up at the crossroads of the social, the historical, and the psychic dimension. Collective memory is always related to the human group in particular. The particular as opposed to the general or to the global, or all the more so to the universal, is the basic element of collective memory. So, in the topography we are dealing with here, well, in the Pacific, this particular is mostly, of course, the nation. The nation taken into consideration not only as society, but as community. But not only, you will see. Because smaller groups, smaller than the nation, can also be sources, hotbeds for collective memory. If you take, for example, these films by Clint Eastwood, some of you have certainly seen already, Letters from Iwo Jima, Flags of Our Fathers. You notice from these films that the veterans from this bloody battle and the veterans from both sides, Americans and Japanese, they are also some kind of a milieu of memory. Or another example from another well-known film, Black Rain, by Shoei Imamura. A film which deals with the fate of the Hibakusha, that is the people who survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and who bear the stigmas of the exposition to radiation. These people, Hibakusha, they are also what we call in French milieu de mémoire, a group of people, that is a group of people sharing a specific narrative or specific narratives in terms of collective memory. And it's easy to imagine that in the context of what we will be dealing with here, the main trend of collective memory is that it is constantly crossed through, divided by all kinds of conflicts. Collective memory, as a rule, is placed under the sign of conflict or conflicts. Conflicts whose stake is the narration of this tragic past. That is, conflicts about facts. Groups don't agree about the description of the facts themselves. They do not happen about the way we have to talk about what happened and who did what. But the conflicts are also about the historical meaning of these facts. That is, this subjective aspect of the question of responsibility, the responsibilities of the actors. Or, of course, conflicts about rights or wrongs, about crimes, and, of course, about sufferings. And this is where cinema, movies, are an inexhaustible spring for conflicting narratives. But also, they are a spring for this kind of work I was talking about, working out, which is very urgently needed in the context of what we are talking about, needed when you have, which was the problem of the American authority in the aftermath of the war. When you have to convert yesterday's monkeys, yesterday's merciful, barbaric enemy, into what? Into a friend, into an ally. And that is what has to happen during Arthur's era in Japan at the time of the war in Korea, at the time of the Cold War. So cinema has to take care of the memory of the apocalyptic dimension of this past. Because it has to be, among other things, the repository of crimes that cannot be forgiven, and that should not be forgotten, what we call introspective. And this on one hand. But on the other hand, and this is intention, of course, this is almost contradictory as a task with the previous. Cinema has to be some kind of a nurse, of a doctor, whose job it is to try to cure the past. That is to dress the memory wounds. That is also a very important task to appease the dead. And these duties actually are conflicting, and we will see on many examples how filmmakers are trying to extricate themselves from this difficult task, or from this, let's say, double injunction. Okay, now shortly I will deal with the question of the narrator. That is, very shortly, because this will be really assessed in time. The question of the narrator, that is question, the issue about who is entitled to relate and what. Who is entitled to recount what. And that means cinema as a new device for the narration of war. War films make possible the fragmentation of the narration, not only of battles, but of war as a global and multipolar phenomenon. Because film put together what is typical for cinema, what cinema makes possible, is to put together a multitude of positions and points of view on war. That is, you have the marine who is landing on the beach, but the war correspondent who is writing his paper on yesterday's battle, the general who is preparing tomorrow's assault, the soldier's wife who is reading the soldier's last letter, etc. all together. And each subject is part of the narration, which means that the narration has some kind of a symphony form, because it's made of the combination of all these different viewpoints on war. And to that extent, of course, we can say that this narration device, cinema, is egalitarian, it's democratic, if you will, because the humblest jihadist position will matter in the general context of the narration of the film. It will matter as much as General MacArthur's position. But from another angle, of course, this egalitarian device set up by the film, it's phony, it's a fake, because the actual narrator is not only this ordinary average man under the uniform, it is actually the film industry. Okay. Now a brief remark on cinema, that is on the use we'll make of films in this seminar. The film is not a text. Cinema is not literature. That means that we do not read films, and that our purpose is not to interpret and comment the film or the parts of film we are going to study in terms of reading. We are not readers of these films, but, as you know, spectators. And that means that the relation between the subject, we, as spectator, and the object, so in that case the film, it's very different. It's very different from reading. And specifically for this kind of film, that is war films. War films at which or for which the dimension of shocks and not only intense emotions. This dimension is absolutely decisive. Shock is at the core of our reception of this kind of films, of this kind of display. And not just, I would say, feelings, emotions, impressions, as which is the case as we are reading a novel or a short story. This specific mode of reception of the film, the war film in particular, has this effect that we do not read, but that we are captured, we are wrapped up in the film. We are taken away into a space which contrasts, of course, totally, completely with what is familiar to us, that is the world in peace. This issue, theme, shock, it's very important. It's coming from Benjamin, what Benjamin writes on the First World War, but also it's very, I would say, topical at the time of globalization and neoliberalism. If you read authors like Dirillo, author on architecture, or bestseller by Naomi Klein, Philosophy. So it's trendy. Okay, and all this means that we have to make special efforts in order to conquer a critical distance in our relation with this kind of object, warfare. For we have to counter these shocks in order to detect what these films are made of. That is, in short, we have to deconstruct. We have to work on deconstruction in the direction of deconstruction of this kind of film. What these films are made of, deconstruct all what these films are made of, that is norms, rules, all kinds of constraints which have their form, the form of these films as a step. Okay, just a simple example. In the general topography of what we are talking about, the film war, it divides itself into different sub-genres. Like you have submarine films, submarine war films. It's a full panel of film submarine, but also war in the air films, war in the jungle films. It's a specific issue. War prisoner camp films, landing films, and so on. And each of these sub-genres has its own norms and rules in terms of forms and plot. So, and this will be clear as we see these films. And since all this, or most of this is placed under the sign of manufacturing rather than, let's say, creating, which is the gesture of art creation. We have to spot and we have to analyze a full set of messages which go through these films, which go through situations, messages which go through situations, which go through characters, which go through pictures, dialogues, and which are combined, which what results from the shock effects of the film. And as we will see, most of these messages which are sent to us by the film are very strictly normalized. And they are like manufacturers' online work. So deconstructing these films, this goes through the deciphering of these messages, that is the discover of their ideological aiming. I say ideological aiming rather than content, because the form and the content all together in that case, they are integral with another. But on the other hand, we have to take into consideration that analyzing in that sense, that is not making an autopsy, that is the post-mortem examination. Why? Because a film, even it has been shot more than half a century ago, the film is still, for us, a living organism. It is not a dead body, because it lives with us in our present. It lives in its relations with the living. It produces constantly new effects, which are varying constantly. It produces new effects by putting the past and the present in relation, by putting the dead and the living in contact or in relation. And from this angle, we have to notice that a film always shows some kind of an excess in comparison of what the intentions of its makers, let's say authors, protagonists, were. And this is the reason why many of these films, which were clearly intended for mobilizing, galvanizing the national public, which conveyed sometimes very heavy racial or even racist stereotypes. Many of these films can be seen today from a completely different angle, from a post-colonial angle, and they can be discovered as fascinating documents, testimony on, let's say, the relations between colonized people, populations, and their colonizers, or testimony on colonial bodies, on Orientalist stereotypes, gender stereotypes in the colony, and so on. So the message is not all in this kind of thing. The message matters a lot. We have to decipher it, but it's not all. The meaning or the meanings of the film always run over the intentions of its makers, and this in the present. The latent content of pictures, of situations, of dialogues, of, I would say, the sheer presence of human bodies reveals itself and is suddenly disclosed, as we see, let's say, for example, in some of these films, one of these films, we see a group of Filipino villagers welcoming their American liberators at the end of the war. But if you watch carefully at these pictures, you will notice on many signs, clues, details, that actually things were not so simple as the explicit message of the film would say. Okay, and to finish, I would say one thing. I'm not a historian, and specifically not historian of war, but not of anything. I'm not either a specialist for film theory or the history of cinema. What I have always been teaching is philosophy. And as such, what I'm interested in is, let's say, the critique of discourses. Critique of discourses, this in line with Michel Foucault, the spirit of Foucault, and a related question to that, that is what we call in French actualité, which is not the English actual. It has nothing in common. Actualité, a very difficult term, well, to translate into English, but which means more or less not what's up to date, that is not simply the present, but if we follow Foucault, according to Foucault, what is topical for us in this very present. That is what is at stake for us in terms of subjectivation of this present. Or in other terms, what we have to take responsibility for in this present. Or how could we or should we take up the challenges we face in this present? Or if you prefer in ethical, political, historical terms, how can we as subjects be up to this present? It could be this about actuality. And this is the reason why I'm interested in this topography, that is Pacific War, and war in the Eastern Asia. That is something which is not an whole story. The whole story we have to learn as in the class of history. But on the contrary, on the opposite, what we should name in French, le passé qui ne passe pas, that is in English, the past which does not pass. But it's more difficult in French. The past which doesn't pass, le passé qui ne passe pas. That is past that infects and haunts the present. And cinema, because it is like the high road through which this invasion of the present by the past happens. This is why we go through cinema with this issue. The way, what I'm interested in is the way this tormented past, Pacific War, Second World War in Eastern Asia. Cinema is the way through which this tormented past is sneaking into the present like a ghost. Or if you prefer, if you are readers of Jacques Derrida, in a spectral way. So, as you can see, almost every day, if you just run over the headlines of newspapers, issues like, let's say, comfort women during the Second World War, or what the people in mainland China call the rape of Nanjing, but as well Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and what follows. That is what Gilbert Anders calls the atomic situation. All these are very explosive political stakes in the present, and in the present context of growing tensions in this region, the Pacific and Eastern Asia. It is striking for me as a European how harsh this contrast is, the contrast of the present situation here in this region of the world with what happened in Western Europe after the Second World War. That is, of course, as you know pretty well, the total changing of relation between nations like France and Germany after the war. And in contrast to what is familiar to us in Western Europe, the wounds from the Second World War continue to bleed in this far east, well, this far east for me, not for you, this far east. That is, the historical traumas are constantly interacting in the relations between people, nations, states. As you know, arms racing is in full swing in this region of the world. Conflicts about sovereignty on whatever inhabited islets or full of fish maritime regions constantly increase. So this is the backdrop of this seminar. And this is even maybe what the seminar is about through this, through the past in some public way. What I'm asking myself and asking you, of course, is from this angle, under what forms or to what conditions could apocalyptic history repeat itself in this region? And by exploring the past, that past which doesn't pass through cinema, what I'm trying to knows is this, so what we call actually in French topicality of such a possible repetition, but repetition, you know, I know that some of you are readers of Gilles Deleuze's work, so you know that repetition, it goes with difference. It always goes with some kind of difference. So this is what I would like to study through cinema, through these films on war. We will analyze during on this set. So that's it. I imagine you're not out. If you want to break or anything, but I finished.
国山老师他几乎把他这个学期14堂课要讲的都跟你们做一个说明了。那我现在就是补充一下，他其实就是说我们这一堂课，有关电影是有3个主轴。第一个就是说，这是个电影的课程，电影的课程，但是我们电影的选材不是以它的艺术价值，而是以它跟我们要讨论的主题、我们的问题化相关的电影。所以有的片子可能是一部，对我们来讲是一部超级大烂片，但是它在我们的这个研究的主题里面是有相当的重要性的，所以我们选那样子的电影来作为我们的参照。第二个就是关于战争的课程，尤其是在于敌人之间如何看待对方。他刚刚讲的就是说，美国自从珍珠港轰炸，日本轰炸珍珠港，一直到战争结束，拍了很多的宣传片。那这些宣传片呢，它其实都是很有意识的在去看待你的敌人，他怎么处理他的敌人，他怎么样去对待他的敌人，他用怎么样去动物化、野兽化、妖魔化他的敌人。好比说，在他所有美国在那一段时期所拍的电影里面，你可以看到日军是什么样的那个肢体，
或者是什么样的动作，他就用这种方式来说，我们美国是文明的，是民主的，那日本人是野蛮的、残暴的，像动物一样，也是有兽性的。他用很多电影的方式来呈现是这一点。那第三个要讲就是可能他刚刚没有讲的很多是关于叙事电影的叙事权战争，尤其是战争历史、战争回忆的叙事这一块。那在这个地方呢，罗萨老师在最早给交大社文所的课程的概要跟目标里面有写了一个，就是说，关于战争叙事的一个历史的演变。最早的时候，其实在第一次世界大战之前的战争，关于我们写战争史，无论你写滑铁卢战役或是怎么样的战争，能够写战争记事或是日志，就像在一条军舰里面写，是船长才能够写日志。那是在战争里面，关于战争史的这个叙述，这个叙述权是在于统帅将军或是参谋总长的这个底下才能够叙述说，我今天的战争日志是怎么样，是怎么样。从来不是一个小兵或者是一个勤务兵，他可以写战争的日志或是叙事战争的叙事，他没有这个权利。那是一直到第一次世界大战期间，法国有一个历史学家 John Nordon Quick， 我把它翻译成诺顿克鲁。他是法国跟英国的有具有这两个血统。那他参加了第一次世界大战，后来因为他有英法两国的语言能力，到1917年他就被调到后方去了。然后后来战争结束到1930年代之前，他就到美国去教书。那到1929年的时候，他就出版了一本书，他就做田野调查，用300多名在第一次世界大战期间在前线、在壕沟、在尾登战场里面，那些当然是幸存者的士兵，由他们的亲身的对战争的体验写出来的第一部是非将领所写的战争的回忆录。这样，那当然这个时候也会引起很大的争议，因为历史学家在写战争史的时候，他所采纳的、他所采用的，一般来讲是将军或是统帅的战争的回忆录，才作为他写战争史的一个依据。但是自从那个诺顿克鲁之后呢，他其实很多人就慢慢知道说，其实一个士兵他有他的观点，他有他的观察，他是每天是在最前线的，在壕沟里面的，他所看到的也许跟将军戴着望远镜去看的那个战争是不一样的，但是他是一个他亲身的体验，他是亲眼目击战争的人，就是所以这个博萨老师他也很强调说，我们的片子选的里面，我们很多是以一个目击证人的方式去看电影，去看战争。那后来在当然呢，诺顿克鲁对战争的这个叙事呢，在第二次世界大战的时候就被很多的历史学家或是战争史学家采用了。同时在自从好莱坞工业兴起之后呢，第二次世界大战的其实战争史，我们慢慢转换到变成是由电影工业呢，它其实也就已经也占尽了这个战争叙事的一个场域里面，甚至成了一个最强势的战争叙事者，取得了战争叙事的主导权。那博萨老师他会说，在一部电影里面，在他所看到的跟战争相关的电影里面，其实从护士，从野战部队里面的护士，一个传令兵，或是一个叼着烟斗的麦克阿瑟将军，或是一个哭泣的母亲，一个哭泣的婴儿，一个孤儿，有很多人在战争里面跟战争相关的人，或者是参与到战争里面的人，他们都有他们亲眼目睹战争的经验，然后从这里看，每一个人都变成了战争的叙事者。但是我们在一部战争电影里面看到，其实战争叙事已经变成是很千面的角色，不是一个声音在叙事，是很多人在叙事，作为一个战争的叙事者。那这个时候呢，战争叙事的这个功能或是角色，它其实又画得更开，画得更远了。不过同时，因为电影工业它有音效，它有剪辑，它有各方面的效果去操纵，或者是去呈现，以电影的那个技术的功能去呈现出一个战争的状况出来， 那尤其是像他刚刚讲的战争电影所造成的震撼效果，就像我们现在坐在一个很凉凉的、很舒服的一个空间里面，然后看到一部那个爆破性很强的、听到很惨烈的叫声，或者是那个所有的震撼声、机关枪扫射声音，这些会让我们有身临其境的感觉，但是好像把我们也推进了那个战场一样，让我们自己也变成一场战争的目击者。但是其实我们不是，因为这里面就是其实已经透露出，到底电影是真的是一个真正的叙事者吗？其实他国小老师就希望透过我们看每一部他所选的电影，或者是以后各位同学，如果你们有其他的电影的话，你们也可以跟老师建议，或者同学也可以讨论看哪一部电影，我们也可以选来看作为这个题材。那等一下我们要看的这一部电影呢，其实就像国小老师他刚刚所讲的，等我们看完之后，他会告诉我们这部电影的起源跟为什么这部电影会产生。从这里我们就可以看到，其实在一个所谓的战争叙事里面，有很多的策略应用在里面。这部电影的背景这部电影的名字叫《12月7号》，就是日军呢那个我们称之为珍珠港事变。其实它所有的影片都是当时美军基地的或是那边的人他们自己拍的那个影片，要不然战争不是你自己设计的，你去拍这个影片，它其实是一个纪录片。那个所有影片的来源都是当时无论是那边的海军或是居民他们所拍的。那在1942年的时候，美国军方他们收集了当时的所有的影片之后呢，他们去请托，你看那个导演怎么讲 ，John Ford 约翰福特对，他们去美国军方去把他们收集到的所有在当时前后所拍的影片，就是无论是谁拍的，当时的那些人所拍的影片，交给那个约翰福特，他们希望他能够把它剪辑成一部纪录片，就是要在美国放映的一部关于珍珠港事变的一个纪录片。那个时候他可能约翰福特他可能很忙或是怎么样，他自己就没有着手去剪辑，他就请他的摄影师一个叫 John Doron 的去把它剪辑成一部片子。那这位 John Doron 呢，他在剪的时候，他剪了1个半小时。他主要剪的部分，因为他看所有的，他说他主要剪的部分是美国军方的没有组织、没有纪律、完全没有备战的心态这一部分，他剪了很多是美国军方在面对那个日本攻击的时候整个的慌乱，还有他们事前很多没有准备工作，因为有人就这样他们拿小到处拍嘛，就可能拍到他们很多纪律很差，完全没有准备，碰到敌军来袭的时候那种慌乱，然后呢就溃不成军的很多这种片段。那么同时，像我们刚刚在电影里面看到他们那个教学生躲防空洞的时候，我们看到很多日本小孩子亚洲的脸孔，或是戴那个皇族面具，那个其实很多是日本人。其实那时候在夏威夷住了很多日本人，那在文木那一带，可能他们算一算都可能有15万人。所以在那个起先的第一部拍的时候，那个剪辑了1个半小时的这部片子里面，也用了很多日本人，因为这个 John Doron 他本身对日本人很好奇，他会觉得住在那边的日本人，他们当时怎么去看待日本攻击美军这个事情？他又对好像对在他的所剪辑的影片里面，对日本人其实是相当友善的。那呈现出来其实是很有那种族群学的风格的一个纪录片。好了，这部片子就剪辑了1个半小时，然后就交给军方。那军方一看，当然这个不符合他们所需要的，那就退回，就不要，那就只好那个 John Ford 就 重新剪符合军方需要的。可是他所能够找到的，只能剪成半个小时，就是我们现在所看到的，就是符合美国军方需要的，去告诉美国人12月7号那天的早上7点到这个1个小时又50分钟，他刚刚讲这段期间发生了什么事情。
Very briefly on 2 issues. First, you have to notice how important the mobilization of Hollywood is important for, let's say, the high command of the US Army, because only a few months after the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, they hired John Ford prepares the film from what has been shot by military, by soldiers on the sides of Pearl Harbor during the attack. That is preparing, his mission was to prepare a film by editing these parts, shots which have been made by these army cameramen on the side of the battle. And you have to remember that at that time, John Ford is the grandmaster in Hollywood. And they just hire him. And this is the right word, they hire him. So it's like that. They say, okay, now you are like on the front and you have to prepare this film. But since John Ford is John Ford, okay, he's shooting his own films, some, I don't know, wonderful Western film at that time, so he has to work together with Toland. Toland is not unknown. He was the cameraman that's on film by Orson Welles. I think Citizen Kane. So, okay, he's somebody too. But okay, he's a cameraman, and he would like to become a filmmaker. So it's an opportunity for him. But he has not understood what the propaganda services or offices from the army needed. They need a mobilization film addressed to the whole population, so that every American citizen stands behind every soldier who will be involved in the battle, in the war, in the Pacific. So, okay, it's mistaken, it's some kind of, I think what Carol said about Japanese population in Hawaii, are these people friends or enemies and things like that. Okay, but it's not the matter, it's not what they want. So, okay, they say no, they don't want the film which Toland has edited. And you can see pretty well in this shortened version, because the film which Toland prepared was about 1 hour and a half. And okay, he shortens. So the military command sends a message to Ford and saying, no, we don't want this. This is not what we hired you for. So okay, do something else. And so he prepares which is the perfect mobilization film, with this wonderful part at the end where the deaths are presented. You see the American community. One is Jewish, another one is from Hungarian origin, one is a typical farmer. No Afro-Americans so far, if I'm not mistaken. So this is very interesting. And this is very contentious because it is true, actually.
There was one.
There's one?
Yeah, there's one.
There's one? No, but I mean, among the dead, the people shooting. And this is very strange because among the dead, I didn't notice. Is there?
Yes.
Okay. But okay, then the American community gathered, and all people, of course, all these people. So this is the first issue. How decisive movie cinema films are, and from the very moment, from the very beginning, and from the very beginning of the war. And the second issue which is interesting for me, it's the beginning of what I call animalization of the enemy. You see General Tojo as this kind of monster, which is, I don't know what to call it, dog, or I don't know what it is, speaking this grotesque English. So this is the very beginning. But not only that, in the film, at the beginning, they describe the voice, the off voice, describes the planes, the Zeros, planes nearing Hawaii, near Pearl Harbor, as tiny locusts. This is the question to those who know English better than me. Is the word locust pejorative, negative? Yes. So it's a difference between locusts and grasshoppers.
It's more related to a plague.
To?
A plague.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have a plague of locusts in the Bible.
Yes, to a plague, yeah. So that's why. Yes. So it's a beginning, and this way of presenting the Japanese as it will go on all the time, and you will see next week other versions, but it's like that from very, very beginning. I'll just tell you why I want to show you this. It's just the beginning of the film, which is a film by Akira Kurosawa, just in order to show that on the other side too, the filmmaker who was to become one of the masters of Japanese cinema in the after war, could be, or was to be hired by one of the main film companies, Japanese film companies at the time, in order to shoot in 44 perfect mobilization or propaganda film, which is called, how is it called? The most beautiful. In English version, of course, in Japanese I do not know how it is called. I should know, but I do not know. So, if you're okay, we just show you now the 11 first minutes of the film. I think you will have an idea. If you want to see the film, the whole film later, it's not difficult. We have the DVD. So it's, how is it? Japanese spoken, English subtitles, like that, yes. Okay, we have to do with what is available. Misunderstanding, men think that women do not agree with the increase of productivity, but it's exactly the reverse. They want to work more, and this is the propaganda.